You know, my two favorite things about summer at the cottage is working the grill and reading a good book. And today I get to bring those two passions together in this conversation with author Jonathan Merritt, which was filmed back in April but feels as fresh as a warm summer day. His new book, Learning to Speak God from Scratch, explores the relationship between language and spirituality, helping us reclaim sacred words that have often lost their meaning in the modern world. So enjoy this conversation with Jonathan Merritt. It's a bit of a long one, so again, feel free to walk around as you listen to it, do the dishes, but it is a really riveting conversation. And one more thing, I know I promised there was a new project releasing. It is coming out, but due to some technical stuff, it's going to be releasing next Wednesday, a whole new podcast I've been working on, and I think you'll love it. All right, enjoy the interview. Learning to speak God from scratch. How are you finding this whole thing?
I've never been to the festival before, and it's sort of like, for book nerds, it's like prom, and I love it. It's super encouraging, just to see people who they love words, and they love thinking about words, and they read books, and there's so much in common. So I've never been before. I feel a little sad, feel a little regret about that, but
I'm surprised about that, because you've been writing for, a decade?
Probably 12 years now.
So I think I've been following your writing for 7 years or so. When did Religion News Services start?
That started about 6 years ago.
Okay, so it would have been early on that I was first engaging with some of your work.
Oh, yeah.
Were you writing before that?
Yes, I was writing. So I started out writing mostly for Christian publications.
Okay.
And then made a real conscious decision one day, because of my passions, because of my connections, and where they were moving, was really to write for the general market about religion.
So this was a question I had for you, because I knew you through Religion News Services. So I knew you as a interviewer, reporter kind of personality. And then all of a sudden it was like, my new book. And I was like, oh, this is like a book from your voice. How have you juggled those things together? Have those always been this kind of information-based news and then personal reflection? Have you always done both?
Well, I started out doing a mixture of reporting, book reviews, film reviews, kind of journalistic.
And was that through RNS?
No, that was through Relevant Magazine and Christianity Today and Charisma and those kinds of organizations. And then I stayed kind of in journalism, but less as a reporter and more as a columnist.
Okay.
So I always come with a point of view.
Yeah.
In the books that I write, those sort of, this is my fourth book, Learning to Speak God from Scratch, my fourth book, they're always a little more personal and a little more confessional.
In the 2 hours that I had in between talking to you and getting this, I did flip and was like, oh, he's talking about moving to New York. There's elements of personal narrative and memoir kind of strewn into this.
Yes.
Very obviously a perspective on faith. But,
well, and because I think that books because of the length tend to be about transformation, right? If you look at every great story, and that's true of books, it's true of film, they're about transformation. Now, a lot of nonfiction books get away from this because they focus on information and not transformation.
Okay.
What I try to do in my books is to blend that together. So I always have transformation points, and that always has to have story. It's always birthed. If I'm going to spend time writing 50,000 words on something, it has to be a lived experience for me.
It can't just be ideas.
It's like giving my life to this. This book, Learning to Speak God from Scratch, took it will be 4.5 years from conception to hitting the bookstores. And that's an exceptionally long time to write a book in the general market. So I just lived it, and I was writing what I was living the whole time.
Are your other books like that as well? I haven't actually read any of your books.
They are all sort of
Apologies for that.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I didn't know we'd be talking if this all came about very last minute.
Yes. They all have some confessional nature. There's always a blending of storytelling and I would say cultural commentary or high-level thought.
Okay.
So you're always going to have those two things. My books are sort of the love child of high-level thought, religiously informed or from a Christian perspective, banging up against stories in society in that moment that I've lived or that people close to me have lived. So that's sort of the genre is always, I would say what I've written up to this point has always been prescriptive memoir.
Okay.
This one is a bit more cultural commentary, but there is a lot of story in it.
Do you think that comes out of the fact that you've been writing a lot of news, and so you've been stepping into very like information-heavy stuff, and now you kind of bring the story into that? Or like
I planned
intentional shift?
No, when I started writing this book, I pitched it to the publishing house. In fact, the publishing house bought a book that was prescriptive memoir.
Okay.
It was very much like the other books that I had written, but it just morphed over time. I think partly because Learning to Speak God from Scratch tells the story of a quiet crisis of the language of faith. That there has been a massive decline in sacred words in the Western world since 1960.
Yeah.
That despite widespread religiosity, we are largely having almost no spiritual conversations on a regular basis in the West.
It's a good idea. It's a great angle.
So as I started to pick at that scab, the things that I was learning, it sort of shifted a little bit. I began to see that the story was not just about me, it was about we. It was a story about society.
Right.
And it
not
was
even just about Christians.
Not even just about
what does this mean for a whole society that has lost the ability to use words that have sacred meaning?
That's exactly right.
It's
and
good.
so
It's interesting.
I just felt like I sort of stumbled upon something that was very significant, and it was a story that needed to be told, and it involved me, but also tens of millions of me's who are not me.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to tell that larger story, and that's really what this book is.
And some of this, in the bit I've been able to flip through, came about when you moved to New York.
Yes.
So where did you come from before that?
I grew up in the South, in the Bible Belt, in Atlanta. I was a pastor. I was a seminary grad. I was in an incredibly insulated Christian community. All my friends were Christians, and the similar kinds of Christians. And then I moved to New York, and as I say in the book, I ran headfirst into an unexpected language barrier. It wasn't that I couldn't speak English, but I could no longer speak God.
Yeah.
And there are many reasons for that. Some words, and I bet a lot of your viewers watching this will resonate with this.
Yeah.
There were some words that I used so many times and so often, I didn't even know what they meant anymore. I couldn't come up with a definition. I never paused to say, what am I saying when I'm saying what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then there were other words, a word like sin or a word like hell, that had taken on such horrible meanings that they would just sort of stick in my throat.
And nobody else wants, like I've said before to my friends who aren't Christians, like, oh, it's whatever it is, we'll say some gentrification. I'm in an urban city gentrifying, and gentrification is a sin. Like there's sin involved, and they're just like, ooh, like you can just feel them tighten up. And I'm like, I don't mean like individuals are gonna burn in hell forever. I mean it's bad, it's broken, and they go, oh, but there is this sense in which these words are so loaded, they're like a gun, and people just can tighten right up when you use some of this.
And the second half of the book, I pick, I think 17 words to kind of reflect on. One is brokenness and one is sin.
Yeah.
And even when I say in sin, like when a person preaches, there's often sin. They don't even realize it. They're doing something positive motivation, but things that are coming out of it are not quite right, and they're not even aware of it. So it's not necessarily that like their preaching is a sin.
Right.
I'm talking about sin is the big bucket that we put things in, that like things are not right in the world. What do we call the not rightness? The things that ought not to be. We have a word for that in the vocabulary of faith. We call that sin. But oftentimes people have experienced that word as a shaming or some sort of guilt-inducing phrase, and so they shy away from it, and they want to use replacement words. And I think that word's important.
It's interesting, like your context in New York, I imagine very post-Christendom, very secular in a lot of ways. So I'm Canadian outside of Toronto. It's real bad. Like I was raised Lutheran, and I actually thought we were the last Christians. Like I didn't know they were. I went to public school. I thought it was me, my sister, my two cousins, and like the future of the faith was on us. And then I went to a youth group and was like, what the hell? And then I went to America and was like, there's a whole country of people just saying that they're Christian, but the language seems like, based on what you're saying, has broken down here. It's almost disappeared in Canadian circles, at least in a secular setting. But we do have, like, I'm a pastor of an 8-year-old church plant, and we have people come that were new for a while that had no faith background. We give them a piece of paper, and I'd say, this is the Christianese BS form. And I just need you to write down everything that is said today by me or by anyone that makes no sense or sounds just nasty. And like, let's meet up after and debrief it. And they'd come up with a list of like, you said, yeah, repentance. That's, I don't know what that means. Does that mean I'm gonna burn in hell? Like, is that no, you said hell. What do you mean by that? You said, I don't know what kind of sermon I'm preaching, but I'm saying all these, but like they'd come with just these words. You know, somebody said to me, washed in the blood of the Lamb, and that's the freakiest thing I've ever heard. Right. So your prescription obviously is not to throw these words out. But,
no, it's to recover and to reimagine them. So words are signposts. They're carrier pigeons. They're buckets. They're empty. They're pointing to something, or they're carrying something, right?
Yeah.
So the word only really has meaning if it's pointing to something.
Yeah.
So what I am saying is that oftentimes those words become tainted, or their meanings become lost, or their meanings need to mature as we mature. Mm-hmm. And the only way to do that is to sit down and to reimagine what those words might mean for us in our day. And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard for a lot of people, particularly if you come from, say, a more conservative or fundamentalist background, because sometimes that means sacrificing something you hold dear, or an idea that maybe you once believed to be true, but you're realizing now is not as true as you once thought.
Sure.
And so that's hard. It's hard. Change is always hard. But that actually, if you talk to linguists, they will tell you that every language is trending in one of two directions: evolution or extinction. Every language will either change or die. And the same is true for the vocabulary of faith.
That's really good. That's really interesting. Damn. So what's the response been from the people that have read it so far?
Very few people have read it. So you're one of the first people to get a copy of the book. The book will release in August.
Okay.
There's a lot of data in it. There's going to be hopefully a big media.
Did you enjoy doing the research for it? Because the idea of researching language, like, I was like, that looks like death. That looks really
It was an adventure. It was fun. And it was fun because as a writer, I know that words matter. And now I was starting, it's almost like the satisfaction you get when you peek behind the curtain and you see the wizard.
Right.
I knew that there was something going on, but now I got a backstage pass.
Right.
I was beginning to see why language was affecting me in certain ways, why it was shaping me in certain ways. You know, now linguists know that the words we use shape the way we think, and the way we think shapes the behaviors we have. So
Arrival.
Right, there you go. Wink, wink, wink. So I was able to now figure out how language worked on a cognitive level, rhetorically.
And there's something about that that's quite satisfying to be like, oh, my hunch was right, maybe even more correct than I thought it was.
That's exactly right.
And being able to articulate that in some sort of specific ways.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so I did love it. Now, was it every ounce of it interesting? No. But in general, I enjoyed it. I loved it. I'm the word geek, right? I'm like you. I'm like everybody at this conference.
Right.
I geek out at this stuff. But I also think if you're not a word geek, I was able in this book to sort out a lot of that, to make it fun and interesting, to thread in stories, and to make it super practical for the person who says, I know that these things are important to me, but oftentimes I don't know how to articulate them for some reason.
Yeah.
And this is a book that equips and empowers those readers to begin to express and be formed by the things that they hold most dear.
So what is it for you, kind of reclaiming some of this language, what has it done for your life as somebody in New York, as somebody working for religious news services and doing these editorials and interviews? Has there been a practical payoff in your own life from this work?
It has been more personal probably than professional. It's restored confidence, not just in the language of faith, but in the faith itself. Okay. It's not only connected me to religious rhetoric, it's connected me to the God behind those words in a more intimate way. And then professionally, I think, on the other hand, there has been some effect. It's been less impactful maybe because it's just what I do from 9 to 5. Yeah. But in my everyday work, it has been impactful because now I've been able to explore in these books and columns and things that I have contributed to, that I've written in or about. I write about things, I write about words oftentimes that I think need a little bit of I think they have more life to give.
Yeah.
And they need a little life breathed into them.
Right.
And so I spend a lot of time with that. Like, great example. I hear people talk about atonement a lot.
Yeah.
And I think probably that's one of the words it's a big, weighty, hard to get your mouth around.
No one's ever said it in any other spot but a seminary or a pulpit.
But it points to something that's very important.
Yeah.
And so I thought, that's a word we need to reimagine. So I had somebody on, Diana Butler-Bass, I brought her on to RNS, to my blog there, and had her write about doubting Thomas. And she says, doubting Thomas is not about doubt, it's about gratitude. And she was able to kind of shift perspective to say, let's stop looking at the table through the lens of the cross and look at the cross through the lens of the table.
Sure.
And this has implications for what you believe even happened on Easter Sunday.
Sure.
So now when you look at the kinds of things that I'm writing about, if you sniff it out, if you look carefully enough, you'll begin to see the fingerprints of what I'm doing. That I'm really trying to reimagine what the vocabulary of faith is and what those words should be.
It's great. The podcast, the Faith Angle.
Yes.
And
with Kirsten Powers.
With
so
Kirsten
I should say
Powers.
Co-host with Kirsten Powers. If you watch CNN, you'll know Kirsten Powers.
The swing is so freaking huge. Is there language elements to the swing to why in America the division is?
Yes. Well, there's yes. I think language has been used to divide us, and language is very powerful in politics. So one of the most common reasons when I ask people, I did a national survey for this book of more than 1,000 Americans, and I asked them, how often do you speak God? And most Americans said not that often. Only about 7% say they have a spiritual religious conversation on a once-a-week basis in the last year. So I took people who didn't speak God often, and I said, why don't you talk about these things more often? You say these things are important. One of the most common answers I got was, these words have been politicized. They've been used in politics to divide us, to manipulate us, to mobilize an electorate, and I just don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
So I think we're starting to see the ways in which rhetoric, religious rhetoric, has been co-opted for political purposes.
So what would be, there's kind of a political angle in language, what would be your, maybe not one thing, but something you would say to people watching this who have walked away from faith? Like a lot of people that watch this channel are people on the edge of faith, and they say, I'm curious, I'd like to re-engage or engage for the first time, but it's just too loaded. What would be your encouragement as a first step for those people when it comes to speaking God?
Well, I think the best thing to do is to develop an awareness of the tensions in your own mind and body that you feel with certain words.
So be able to like name.
Well, when you say a word, or when you hear a word that doesn't sit right with you, or that you don't understand, to stop, to pause, to think about, what did that word mean that's so bothersome to me? What are the ways that word's been used to oppress others, or to hurt the marginalized, or that has misshapen our view of God as being less loving or less good than I believe God to be? And would there be a way of reimagining this word that would serve me well?
Yeah.
Then you can stop rejecting faith because of definitions that have been given to you, and you can begin to accept faith from the definitions that have been birthed inside of you. And you can do that. Like everybody can do that when they approach faith. And I think it should be done in community. We walk together. We struggle together. And I think it should be done in community. I think that's a real hope-giving, life-giving process.
So if you're watching this and you're a part of a church community, or a home church, or a small group, or whatever little thing you got, you should buy. You like this?
Here it goes.
Yeah.
We're coming for you.
In August, when it releases.
In August.
Learning to Speak God from scratch.
Learning to Speak
the book.
God.
Just get focused on.
There it is.
I actually think this could be a really good tool for people that are in a home church, a small group, an intentional community, whatever you got, to sit down and say, here's a bunch of words that make me feel sick. Why?
Yes,
and let's figure that out.
And I don't just think that. I really do believe that's true. I think we are in the middle of a crisis that we don't even realize, and I think people do need hope in this generation, that we cannot just revive the language of faith, but faith itself.
Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You got to come to Canada and
let's
bring
do
the
it.
tour up.